This is a special podcast presentation from 700WLW.com. This is Doc Thompson On Demand.
It's gotten decidedly worse in Japan now. Much worse. USS George Washington, hundreds of miles away, detecting an increase in radiation now. More troubles continue with their reactors. If you are interested in giving, if you are interested in doing what you can to help Japan, there's a couple of routes. Of course, Matthew 25 Ministries locally, you can donate, and they will make sure that the goods, the items are sent to Japan as they do around the world. You can also go to 700WLW.com, my blog there, brought to you by the American Trading Company. I have a link to our storm aid that our parent company uses. They've used it for Haiti and some other situations as well. Go there, all the details. You'll see storm aid for Japan, my blog, 700WLW.com. It's getting worse and worse. Hopefully, things will start turning around. Hopefully, very soon they will get control of their reactors and they can start cleaning up and putting their lives back together. New poll out shows John Kasich's ratings, his approval rating, 40%. 47% of adults disapprove. That is terrible. Guy's only been in a short while, couple of months. And what has he done? What has he done in that amount of time to really be rated on? It's been basically smoke and mirrors. It's been basically media stuff. Well, his budget comes out today, so you can't dislike the budget yet. The job he's done over the last couple months, the only references to it have been that there are going to be huge cuts. So I guess people could be reacting to the cuts, although it's pretty evenly split when it comes to whether or not we should cut. Collective bargaining, well, his support of Senate Bill 5, that could be, skewing it a little bit. I guess that's a reason to dislike him, and there are a lot of government employees in the state that could be upset by it. But 40%. See, I think most of it comes down to perception. He is losing when it comes to perception. Yesterday, he decided to turn around his plan to ban the media from videotaping or audio recording his press conference today about the budget. Originally, the journalists were told that they could bring pens and notepads and tape recorders, but they couldn't use the audio in the tape recorders to broadcast. They could only use it to check their facts when it came to what they were writing down with their pen and notepad. They have since turned that around. It is outrageous that they would have not wanted the cameras and audio in there. To even consider that is a ridiculous plan. Transparency and openness is the key. That's got to be at the center of a free society. So what do you have? The governor saying you can't bring it in? Why? Well, if it's as big of a press conference as I think it's going to be, I mean, he's talking about the budget, and this is going to be pretty serious. I can't imagine that they were thinking, well, the logistics might be difficult. I mean, there is precedent for people recording the governor. That's the precedent. So I was trying to give them the benefit of the doubt and saying, well, maybe logistically they thought it was going to be a very short meeting at first and didn't want all the cameras drug in or whatever. I still think that's the best option. But no, it's going to be a budget meeting. This is the awaited budget that he is going to propose. With a lot of cuts. There's a lot of people waiting to see what's happening here. So I can only imagine that they didn't initially want video recorders and audio recording because they didn't want him on tape mentioning the cuts. Could that be it? Maybe down the road, I would think that down the road, if he's interviewed on stations like this, he would be on tape discussing the stuff. John Kasich doesn't seem like somebody who would shy away from that. But that's the only thing that makes sense to me. Why would you not want the recordings? Why else? Nothing else seems plausible to me. It's got to be open, got to be transparent. But now they've reversed themselves. So that looks bad. And even if there was nothing questionable about them not wanting the video cameras, even if it was something that has not crossed my mind, something completely honest, another reason, it's still the perception that you have to battle. When you are in the public eye, when you're in that situation, perception becomes reality. You've got to avoid the perception of any type of impropriety. Avoid the perception that you're not being open. Because even if you are completely open, even if you are completely honest and forthright, what happens is the crazies come out and say that you're not being based on something that isn't true. It's difficult enough to battle those people without deep sixing yourself here. We've had other situations like that with the governor as well. Well, when it came to his staff and what he's paying them, he's paying some people more than what Ted Strickland was paying his staff. I think that's ridiculous. If you're asking cops and firefighters to cut, if you're asking teachers to cut and everybody else, the governor should be cutting what the previous governor paid people. It should be reasonable, and it's certainly not reasonable if you're making over six figures working for the governor. I'm sorry, I just don't think that's right. But he didn't do himself any favors because cumulatively on his staff, he's paying less. That's a good thing. Had they led with that, had they talked about that, they may have won the war of perception in the media. Imagine how much less he would be paying if he paid those people a little less now. Imagine if he came out and said, listen, I'm about fiscal responsibility. This is something I've campaigned on. I've asked cops and firefighters and teachers to take cuts. I am going to make sure my staff makes less than my predecessor. And I'm also going to make sure overall my budget for my staff is less. He should have done both. When it came to security at his house, I initially came out and said it's outrageous that he's going to spend more to live at home. I don't think that's a good idea ever, and certainly not now with the economic situation in Ohio. He certainly shouldn't be doing that. Overall, he's going to spend less. Perception-wise, he should have led with that. But he still should have done the right thing and cut across the board, starting with himself. His budget is going to come out today, and by his own admissions, it's going to be loaded with cuts. There are going to be a lot of cuts. He should have started with himself. I think overall, reducing what he spends, what the governor's office spends, has been a good thing. But you're battling two things. Perception, you lost that, and then actual deeds. Yeah, you have cut across the board with the budget in general for what you spend on staff, but you should be cutting individually as well. If you're asking other people to sacrifice, if you're asking Ohioans to either cut, or maybe down the road somebody will come up with the idea of extra taxes, although the governor has said that's not something he wants, either way, it is a sacrifice by all Ohioans. You got to start with yourself. And even though, like I said, he is cutting in general what he's spending, his budget is less than his predecessor, what he's paying for his staff and security and stuff. You've got to take it all the way. You've got to even go to the point of your individual staff members, whether just for perception or in practicality, in application. You have to do it right now. $8 to $10 billion deficit, huge cuts coming, ending collective bargaining. You have to do it in your office as well. Jeff on a cell phone, you're on 700 WLW.
First of all, I think that most of the negativity is coming from the unions and the papers and the Cleveland Dispatch and the Columbus papers, and they control a lot of the information.
Sure, that's a big part of it. Yeah, the union people, and I understand why they're upset with him.
Yeah, well, I understand why they shouldn't be, because you just said everybody's got to take a cut unless you're a union member. And with his staff, I think he did it on a merit basis. If some man over there, let's turn it over to radio. If you have a personality that's generating a lot of money for your particular station, and you have one that's not generating a lot of money, let's reward those who work harder and those who aren't bringing in a little less. I think he may have done this with his staff. I'm going to pay the good ones a tad more we're going to cut the bad ones a lot less, and overall he's paying less. It shouldn't be even. We don't live in that type of a society where it's a merit basis. And if he wants to cut the taxes, or he's got this huge deficit he's facing. There's nothing he can do about it. He inherited this. And if I had this news conference coming up, I wouldn't have a camera in the place and I wouldn't have a recorder in the place, because I have been on the road for 40 years and I have seen how they can take snippets out and change the complete meaning, the context, and what he is trying to say, and they'll show that over and over and over.
If they do that, Jeff, if the media does that, and that happens every day, that is on them. A governor, a president.
On them, the people have already heard it. You can't take it like
Jeff,
disregard jury what I'm saying. They've heard it.
Jeff, a president, a governor, elected servants have to be as honest and open as possible. The governor needs to have cameras there. He should anyways, because that's what should happen in government. That way we all understand what's going on. We're all connected, and there are few secrets except for a few security secrets. There should be very few. But even if you don't agree with that, the perception is gargantuan. If you lose perception as a governor, certainly coming in, facing this gargantuan debt, facing the problems that Ohio and the Midwest in general face, the tri-state, you've lost already. You have to get people on the same page. That's what leaders do. You're not bribing them. You're not lying to them. You're not compromising so you're giving them something in order to get their vote. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about leading, where you say, listen, you're going to suffer. That's the only way out. But everybody is going to suffer. He asked that of the unions, and I agree with him there. But that's only part of it. I agree with the merit-based pay. He should be basing his pay his staff on their merit. But in general, across the board, we pay too much when it comes to staff members in Congress. We pay too much, generally speaking, for commissioners, for councilmen. Look at what these people make. And as I mentioned, when it comes to perception, you've got to get people behind you. It's difficult for him, although he has cut in general his budget and what he is spending. It is difficult to go to the cops and firefighters and say, we've got people that we actually increase their salary. Now, according to what I believe John Kasich wants and what I think should happen when it comes to getting rid of collective bargaining, there would be merit-based pay. And you may have cops, firefighters, and teachers that make more down the road. But we've got to reset some of this stuff. We have to bring our spending down when it comes to all of these different people who work for the public, who are government workers. We've got to bring everybody down. It's gotten wildly out of control. Listen, I understand that there are plenty of people who are barely making a living, $20,000, $30,000 a year that work for the government. But there are plenty that make a whole lot. And I'm not talking just about you union workers. I'm talking about your supervisors, the people that weren't part of the union or collective bargaining. And that would include people who work for the governor, assistants and staff members across the board. That has to be reset. All of that needs to be brought down. It's like we've had this giant bubble when it comes to all government workers. And by government workers, I also mean those that have been elected and their staff members that may not fall under unions. There's been this huge bubble. Almost like the housing market bubble where everything just keeps going up and up and up and up. That's unsustainable, it's unrealistic, and people are making too much. Bring the whole thing down. Then base it on merit. The governor is losing the war of perception. He is not leading. He is not telling the people that he's asked to take a cut or about to tell that they're going to need to take a cut, that he is willing to do it as well. Where is the governor cutting his pay? He should come out and say, I'm going to take a huge cut as well. Maybe that will be part of it. But I haven't heard a lot of that since. We get some of your calls coming up next. 700 WLW. Fox 19 Storm Tracker forecast for this afternoon. Periods of rain, high around 52. Scattered light showers tonight. Morning rain tomorrow, then sunshine in the afternoon with a high near 59. It's 45 right now at the big one. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. when it comes to overall costs. I have some of the numbers for all of the cops and firefighters for Westchester. Now, granted, Westchester is not a poor community, but you tell me if you think these are high. And I have an entire spreadsheet that lays out the couple hundred, I think it is, employees. At the top, in total compensation, the administrator is getting $180,000 a year. Base salary, $143,000. That means their pension value for the year, $24,000 in pension. That's getting real close to a salary for somebody. Health insurance, $12,500. The health insurance is fixed all the way down the list. And that is not outrageous, but the pensions are pretty high. With total compensation, I'm going to start at the bottom of the list and tell you what the people make. Again, this total compensation. $82,000 a year is the lowest. There are 8 people making in the 80s total compensation. 34 people in the 90s total compensation making $90,000 a year. Total compensation of people making $100,000 to $110,000 a year, 54. Total compensation of people making $110,000 to $120,000, 26 people. In the $120,000 to $130,000, 9 people. $130,000 to $139,000, 7 people. 11 people making $140,000 to $149,000. $140,000 to $149,000 a year, 11 people, total compensation. And there are 9 people making over $150,000 a year in total compensation. Now, I know if you understand, if you take the low end, you take the $82,000, and there's only a couple of people in the 80s, and you take out their retirement and their health care costs, it's a lot lower. It's still over $60,000 a year. I know that's not getting rich, but you have to factor in those other things. Generally speaking, we're paying people too much when it comes to the government workers. Tom Fairfield, you're on 700 WLW.
Oh, yeah. I appreciate you mentioning that the governor could make some cuts also. The fact that he hasn't even sat down to talk with any of these unions about any concessions. And my wife is actually a state employee, and her union has made concessions, and nobody's mentioned that. She hasn't had a raise in 6 years. She's taken furlough days. So there are efforts being made on some of the public employees' parts. I can't speak for the firemen or the police. I don't know exactly, but I know from her perspective that she has taken cuts, and nobody seems to have mentioned or researched that.
We've talked about that. Do you recognize overall that Kasich has cut his budget?
It's not being advertised very well. You don't really see it. And again, from her perspective, he comes in, brings in all his administrators, the people he's appointed to, in an effort to seemingly privatize everything in the state.
Do you think that's a bad thing?
If you look at other states that have done this, yeah, I don't think it's a great idea. Because it's not going to, for the people at the bottom, it's not going to pay off for the company's employees or the general public. Because as soon as you bring it in for profit, that's going to raise costs for everybody.
Well, I appreciate the call, Tom. I got to skate. That usually has not been the case. It doesn't necessarily increase the cost for everybody. We'll talk more about it and take some more of your calls coming up on 700 WL. It's Doc Thompson on 700 WLW. So the governor's going to release his budget today. Sure to have a bunch of cuts. I just think he's losing the battle with perception and a little bit in practicality. Overall, we've got to cut. I think if he wants perception-wise to come out as a leader and say we're all truly feeling the pain, then he needs to start with himself. I mean, personally, his salary, and maybe that's something he's going to do down the road. He needs to start with his staff. Now, overall, he is spending less on them, but individually as well. Yeah, I know overall it's less, but for the average person out there that doesn't pay a lot of attention to it, that may be a government worker, they say, wait a minute, I'm being asked to sacrifice here. And then some of the news reports that don't tell the entire story say, well, his staff members are making more than Ted Strickland's. You're losing there. You've got to be so far above board that you actually suffer, that your staff actually suffers, maybe not get what they should be getting. That's how you got to lead in a situation like this. Then down the road, when people understand that you are trustworthy, that your ideas are paying off, then maybe you can take care of them a little bit more. Until then, you're losing it. Leading means getting people to understand that you have the best ideas and that we're all truly in it together. Even if we have political differences about some of the things, overall, this is the direction we need to head, and I'm not asking just some people to shoulder the burden. I'm asking everybody to shoulder the burden. Let's go to Dick now, Westchester. You're on 700 WLW.
Yeah, Doc. Number one, I like your show a lot.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
And mine is pretty much straightforward. You know, when I grew up, there was always a white collar, blue collar. And, you strive to go from blue collar to white collar, and everything was a noble cause, realistically.
You mean, when you say blue collar and white collar, do you mean just you struggle to go from one to the other as far as the job, or usually the money that comes with it?
Well, the money and the aspiration.
Okay.
There was always an aspiration. And, but behind the scenes was all the civil employee, and they were always pretty good jobs, et cetera, not taking that away from that, the job content. But their salaries kept going up and up and up and up. And I say, now you have a new collar. It's the purple collar. And that's where you're between, the blue collar, white collar. These are fixed, almost honorific sort of jobs, which obviously I can appreciate everybody's struggling with, what they make and what they think they should make and that sort of thing. But I agree with you. The regular rule in the regular workplace is sacrifice, in that we're in the middle of all that. And then these people, I think they should participate too, in a practical, honorable way. But they have to participate because you can't keep it going up and up and up. It's no different than the housing crisis. There really is one. I mean, when, 30% of the people's houses in this area here are upside down, that was a never before heard of thing. So I'm just saying that people should take into account that there is going to be sacrifice. A lot of the people have already made huge sacrifices in the regular world, and these people are going to have to address it too. Because, number one, they're out of money. They all get paid by tax base.
That's interesting. I think a lot of times government workers misunderstand that the rest of us quite often see what they do as a commodity, just like anything else, that we don't separate government from the private sector in our minds. It's you have a job to do to provide a service. It's something we need. So it should be run like a business. And that's how we see it. If times are tight and that business isn't bringing in enough money, then the business has to adjust its business model. The difference is they bring in money with that business through taxes. And it's frustrating that they can just say, well, I'm just going to raise taxes and make more money. That's the frustration from a lot of people. I think expectation, the wrong attitude is something that's gotten us to where we are right now. If you look at somebody like me in your mid-40s and you look at somebody who's getting out of college now, maybe somebody that's in high school, and all of the stuff they want, they feel entitled. They just assume, well, I'm out of college, I've got a degree, I should have a job, and I should have a job making hundreds of thousands a year, and I should have that big, huge house. I should have this perfect life now. That's in their mind. Kids in high school and younger, same thing. I should have the PlayStation because Pete does. And I should have the cell phone. And I should have all of these things because Pete does. Well, I think in general we've all gotten that way. Nobody wants to wait. Nobody says, I'm going to start with a modest house after being married a couple of years like they used to. And then if I work real hard and get a little bit lucky, then I'll upgrade that house. Then maybe down the road a few years, maybe upgrade that one to the point that I have a nice house. Nope, it's got to be now. And I think a lot of us look around and go, why don't I have this stuff? I think that's kind of at the center of the problem. Now, there are going to be a bunch of people that end up protesting today at the governor's budget meeting. When he releases all the information on where it's going to cut, a bunch of the government workers, a lot of the people that were protesting SB 5 are going to be protesting. I wonder if they will protest what the University of Cincinnati is going to pay David Stern. These are the things you need to protest. Instead of telling the governor, hey, don't cut. That looks selfish. Whether you are or not, whether you're being reasonable or not, that's the perception from your end. Your end is, I'm going to go protest because I don't have. Many of you don't have. Many of you government workers aren't getting huge salaries or huge retirement plans, but some are. So instead of protesting that looks like you're upset on your behalf, your personal retirement, your personal salary, why not get active and talk about things like David Stern? A guy who has made $600,000 a year as the dean of the College of Medicine and the vice president for health affairs at UC, who is getting a $900,000 severance package. It's those things that are hurting. It's bad decisions like that. A $900,000 severance package? Would he, after making $600,000 of a year, have suffered if his severance package was only $200,000? Would that have put on him an undue hardship? Now, I understand he probably had a contract, and the board of trustees at UC is probably just trying to come up with the best deal to get out from underneath the contract. The problem is, who made the deal in the first place that put the University of Cincinnati and the taxpayers on the hook for something that could and now has led to a $900,000 severance package? We've got to look at it all. UC in the red. Ohio in the red. Let's give him a $900,000 severance package. If you don't protest these things, if you don't talk about these things, if you don't talk to your General Assembly, if you don't talk to your governor and say this stuff has got to stop, I'm sorry. Dean or not, you're not worth $600,000 a year. I'm sorry. You don't work in the private sector. You haven't invented a computer. You haven't invented a vaccine that's going to be sold around the world that makes hundreds of billions of dollars. When you do that, work in the private sector and then make $10 million a year because you're selling something that is that valuable that people want. $600,000 a year for a dean or a professor is ridiculous. And a $900,000 severance package is outrageous. $900,000 to go away? It's not like the guy's Tracy Jones, where people are happy to get rid of him. $900,000 to go away. This is what you should be marching on Columbus for. Doc Thompson on the big one, 700 WLW. All right, coming up at 10:18 this morning. 10:18. Lower standards for Dayton cops. Oh, yeah, they're lowering the standards, and guess why? Well, we'll talk about it at 10:18. Kim and Mason sent me an email, doc at 700WLW.com. She said, you're right on the mark. It's not what the governor is doing, it's how he's doing it. I've been one of his most ardent supporters, but because of his tactics, he's steadily losing my support. It's interesting, Kim. I like the fact that he's strong and firm. He said, we are not going to raise taxes in Ohio. Now, assuming he sticks to that, I like that. I like that he's been firm with the unions, that this is something that needs to change. We need to give the power to the local communities. If they want to collectively bargain, fine. Now, that wasn't a perfect bill. I know that. But I like that he's been firm. What I don't like is not leading. Being firm is only part of it. Think about it as being a parent. It's not just ruling with an iron fist. Think about being a manager at work. It's not just ruling with an iron fist that this is how it's going to be. You've got to be firm. Here is the plan. So we all know this is where we're going. And we are firmly committed to it. That's the firm part. But let me tell you the entire plan. Let me tell you how it affects me. Let me show you how I'm in the trenches as well. Being firm and ruling with an iron fist is only part of it. He's got to also convince people that he's doing the right things. And convincing them is showing them. Lead by example. Maybe that's going to happen. Maybe he has just been waiting for the budget to come out. Maybe today's the day. There are sure to be battles. The battles are going to be gargantuan. Tomorrow, you will see people are going bug nuts. Every local school district, teacher, every organization, government work, people are going to be going crazy. If it's what I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be drastic cuts. People are going to be going bug nuts. You've got to show them how down the road it's going to get better. I've only recently heard him start talking about that. Mark in Anderson, you're on 700 WLW.
How you doing this morning?
How are you, sir?
Good. So I have a small business. We're about 2.5 years old. We run conferences. We have an association. We have a media company, basically. And what I see with this younger generation is and we're starting to hire better people. So when you first start, do you have a heartbeat? Do you have a pulse? Can you work? Can you operate a computer? But when you really get into the intellectual core of what we need, our younger generation is very challenged. They want more today. Their expectations are higher. And they see me working 80, 90 hours a week. They're like, wow, that's crazy. Why do you work so much? Why do you work so hard? Well, my company has grown 50% each year. This year we're going to double in size, expand into Europe. And these kids love the opportunities of going to conferences, both domestically and internationally. They love the magazine. They love what we're doing. But getting people that really want to work, these young kids, to come in and work the 10-hour days, it's a challenge. I don't know if it's a mindset. I've become a better manager getting these kids to really, and we have more than just kids, but it's just expectation. They all want $80,000 a year. They all want 6 weeks vacation, and they want to work 8-hour days.
The truth is, Mark, they're too far from World War II. They are too far from, yes, we've had other wars since then, but obviously World War II had a greater sacrifice to society overall as far as what people were earning, where they were working, and rationing and stuff like that. Certainly there were many of other sacrifices since then. But we have been relatively stable since then, and our quality of life has gone up and up and up. So now they have lived under that blanket of protection and of plenty and not had to sacrifice. And we give them awards for coming in 12th place because we're worried about their self-esteem and all of that stuff. They don't understand work hard and sacrifice. That's not part of their equation. It's Doc Thompson on 700 WLW. Oh, man, I am excited about opening day. The Tri-State Chevy Dealers Cincinnati Reds opening day coverage on the big one, presented by Callaway Cleaning and Restoration and Meyer Activewear. It'll be me, Jim Scott, Sloaney and Tracy, and Mark Amazon live at Cadillac Ranch. And then look for Jim, me, and Jeff Henderson in the Findlay Market opening day parade presented by R&L Carriers. This is going to be big. It's going to be, except for the hanging out with Tracy Jones part, it'll be real fun. Dwight in Westwood, you're on 700 WLW.
Hi, Doc. Nice to talk to you again.
Thank you, sir.
This is what I wanted to bring up. I understand, and I certainly agree with some of the comments that you're making with regard to Kasich not being a very good leader in this whole matter and so on and so forth. But I'm going to deviate from that a little bit. In 2008, all we heard was, these guys from AIG or whoever you want to name, making $1 million bonuses or $100,000 bonuses. It kind of irked me at the time. I was retiring. And at the time, I was collecting a considerable bonus. Now, not to the tune of $100,000, but for me, it was very nice money, and I deserved it. So, I'm going, boy, it's really interesting. I wouldn't have worked for that company if you or whoever was going to complain about me getting a bonus at the end of the year. And it seems that we're doing the same thing here with public employees unions. Although I agree that I think that in many cases they may be overpaid, but it's almost like this whole socialist slant that our country is taking on. First, it's somebody making a $100,000 bonus at AIG. Now it's public employees unions.
Well, I do got to.
Where does that stop? Why are we doing this to ourselves?
Well, I do got to skate, Dwight, but I appreciate the comments. The difference is when it comes to government employees, they are not in the private sector. They are not generating revenue based on their products and services. There's a difference, and that's at the core of all of this. There is a difference between private and public sector when it comes to being able to pay a lot of money and huge benefits. AIG's bonuses were fine. They should have gotten them if it was part of their contract. If not, then they shouldn't have. It depends on the company. You and I should have no say over what AIG and the other people got, except for they got our money. They should have just never gotten our money. And then if they want to pay those people bonuses, it's up to that company. That company will either fail if it was a bad idea to pay them bonuses, or it will succeed if it was a good idea. You and I should have had no say because it shouldn't have been our money. Government employees, it is our money. And they don't create income. They take taxes. It's Doc Thompson, home of the Reds, 700 WLW.